Yeah, what up everybody, it's Tuna. In today's video I wanted to show you guys a build that I've been playing for the last few days. Got it to level 100 here in last Epoch. And it is the Warlock, Chthonic Fissure. Basically, you might have heard about this, but essentially, Profane Veil currently is giving you a lot more ward than it's intended to give you. And what that results in is your character being absurdly tanky, right? You'd think that right now I have like about 4,000 combined EHP. But when I use Bone Curse and I consume my Bone Curses with Profane Veil, yeah, the numbers get quite absurd. So you can see that we're actually going well above 65,000. And you can actually increase this to even crazier numbers. And what does that result in? That results in a build that can basically just face tank bosses, and it deals a crazy amount of damage. So I'm going to show you guys, I've only really pushed up to 630 corruption here in this zone. But just to give you guys an idea of what like the build looks like and how it functions. So essentially you're going to just basically top up your ward as much as possible, right? Like you're going to get that up before you engage the boss. You're going to put your curses down. Then you want to spam Spirit Plague until you see about 40 stacks here of Ignite on yourself. Once you do that, you're going to put down your Chthonic Fissure. And then again, you want to consume your walls, to get up your ward. And you can see that you can basically like stand in everything, and you just repeat the process over and over again until basically the boss is dead. And the damage is actually pretty insane, all things considered, right? The damage is absolutely insane, all things considered. And if you do the rotation correctly, you're basically going to have like no downtime on your Chthonic Fissure. Just make sure that you are kind of like spamming your curses beforehand. And once the boss gets to 15% HP, you can just basically call him with with your transplant, right? So this build is pretty damn insane. It has like very good single target. However, if you were to present the build to me just like I presented it to you, I would think like, yo, that sounds like a little bit clunky. Like, do I have to be pressing Spirit Plague to deal my damage and that kind of stuff? And the answer to that is actually no. Let me just make sure it's not an arena. Okay. So obviously while you're clearing, you don't need that damage. That damage is just there for when you need it. And yeah, the build is like pretty decently fast. Like it's not obviously gonna be like Falconer or Blade Dancer type of fast, but it goes pretty damn fast. Like you deal a lot of damage and you are dealing damage while you're moving. So you're just pulling your Chthonic Fissure down as you move along. Things are going to be dying, and there's some really cool interactions as well that causes your damage to proliferate. And yeah, I mean, for 700 corruption, honestly, it holds its own. And you don't really have to like worry too much about Bone Curse and Profane Veil. You're just kind of clicking it every so often to top up your ward. Nothing is going to kill you even with 30,000. And just move along. You do your objectives as things are dying, behind you and that kind of stuff. And yeah, honestly, it's like a very satisfying playstyle. You deal like a ton of damage, you deal damage while you move, and on top of that, you're pretty much unkillable. So that's like very high potential for both arena pushing and also monolith pushing if you're into that kind of stuff. You want to push high corruptions or you want to push high arenas. Yeah, you can do that. Cool, we got some intelligence exalted there, so that's pretty nice. Alright, so yeah, that's basically the build, and basically like a showcase of just how strong it is and how absurd it is. It's like the craziest thing I've ever played in this game, honestly, and it's a bug, right? So the potential for it to be bug fix is there. However, I don't necessarily feel like it's going to be too soon, but either way, if it is actually sooner rather than later, it doesn't make all that much of a difference, because you go from having pretty much like hundreds of thousands of ward to potentially that ward being 30, 40,000, which is like, yo, they did nerf the build by a substantial amount, but you still have so much ward, more ward than you could ever spare, right? So if they were to fix that, it'd be totally fine. So yeah, let me just show you exactly why we're getting this much ward. So it's thanks to the Vampiric Pool passive. This Vampiric Pool passive, what it's doing is it's granting you a portion of your minion's health to your ward. So that's 4%. And then we use Bone Curse. And Bone Curse, otherwise, we wouldn't consider this to be a minion, but in this situation it is. And we are giving it a ton of HP here with Ossify. It has 500 base HP, so you get this up to 3,000. And then also you want to reduce its cooldown by 70%. And it has like little gaps, it doesn't really matter. The rest of the passives are just for quality of life and that sort of stuff. as well as like a little bit of damage. But essentially, all you want to worry about is getting the HP of these walls up. And then what you can actually do is you can stack increased minion HP on your gear to get this number much higher, right? So yeah, you can get a lot of minion HP on your jewelry and that sort of stuff. But yeah, enough rambling about like the build and what it looks like and that kind of stuff. So let me just open up here. I made a sheet for you guys to take a look at. And this is going to be the stat priority, what you're looking for on this build. So yeah, little flashbang there. Sorry about that. So first of all, the body armor, you're looking for a burial plate. That's because it has, you know, a decent amount of armor, but it also gives you cold resistance. You're going to be struggling on resistances a little bit once you start to really crazy min-max the build. And yeah, that's just because of like, you know, you're pushing out affixes in favor of damage and of course tankiness, but do not neglect your resistances. You want to get your resistances up to cap, of course, you know, all of them. So yeah, body armor, you want to have primarily intelligence and necrotic resistance, as well as minion health. You know, minion health intelligence on the prefixes is really nice, but if you can't get minion health, you know, Chthonic Fissure levels is also pretty good. And you can also alternatively get necrotic damage, which is shared. And yeah, those are the main stats that you want on your chest. Make sure that if you were to get something exalted, you would rather have intelligence because it rolls up to 24%, I believe. Let me just check that in game real quick. It rolls up to 24%, correct, yeah. So yeah. Exalted intelligence is ideal here. Now for the helmet, you want to use the Bone Clamor's Bar Boot. This helmet is actually like kind of insane because not only does it provide you with a ton of stats, like it gives a ton of intelligence, it also gives armor, but it enables you to sort of sit at like a comfortable 4,000 or 5,000 ward without actually investing in you know, any other ward type of, you know, like lose life, gain ward mechanic like you otherwise would see on many low life builds. But since we do have so much intelligence, we retain a lot of the ward that we gain through the Bone Clamor Bar Boot. And it's very synergistic because we're stacking so much necrotic resistance. And the reason why this is giving us so much ward is because, you know, 1 ward per second per 3% uncapped necrotic resistance. So you can see that in game I'm actually like 3.7k. If I take that off, that goes down all the way to like 1.5k or something like that. So yeah, this helmet is insane. And of course, if you want to aim for getting it with legendary potential, and the main things that you want to get on there for the legendary potential are spell curse damage, necrotic resistance, or intelligence. You know, either of those are what you really want to go for. Now for your weapon, you know, this is nerfed, but it's still absolutely broken. The Mad Alchemist Ladle is insane still, as long as it has legendary potential on it, right? You don't want to just like go about like, even 1 LP is pretty good, but you want 1 LP with a stat that, you know, one of these stats on it. Before you swap to it. Otherwise, you could just use like a normal non-legendary piece. But yeah, the stats that you want to transfer onto the ladle ideally are critical strike multiplier, necrotic penetration, or you know, unfortunately, like these are not that great, but I'll list them here just in case you guys, you know, if you're crafting your weapon to try to transfer it on, necrotic damage, damage over time, or cast speed. I mean, you might think to yourself, why are we stacking critical strike multiplier? And why are we stacking so much necrotic resistance and penetration? Well, yeah, Chthonic Fissure actually scales with both overcap necrotic resistance because of here twisted waves, which we max out, of course. We're going to be getting damage, which is multiplicative. So you're going to be, you know, essentially getting a more multiplier from this, depending on how much necrotic resistance you have. And then here, Grim Tides allows you to get 1% more damage per 1% crit multi. Crit multi takes priority over necrotic resistance, but they are both amazing stats. So yeah, get them as much as possible. Because this is the way that we're going to be scaling our damage, and this is the only way where you can get like crazy damage, you know, to push into corruptions and also to, you know, like kill bosses like Jewel Run and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I actually got very lucky. Let me show this one off. I got insanely lucky on this. I got T7 necrotic penetration with T1 multi, or T5 rather multi, on my ladle, so I am very happy. That was a huge upgrade for me. And another bonus of the ladle is that like we don't really go for any mana regen on this build. So you know, if you were to spam, which you shouldn't do, by the way, like this build doesn't spam skills because of how long they last. But if you were to like spam and run yourself out of mana, you can actually use life flasks to top up your mana again, and that's thanks to the ladle. So that's like a really nice little yeah, that's like a really nice little extra that you get from that. And of course, the cast speed feels very good when you're stacking up your self-ignite, and also it's for you know, profane veil reduction of you know, its cooldown and whatnot. So yeah, very very nice. Like Ladle is still insane. Then for our rings, this is very important to get ivory rings, you know, because ivory rings give you necrotic resistance. Necrotic resistance, as we just mentioned, it's a more multiplier, so it's, yeah, this ring base is completely broken for us. The ward decay threshold is actually not that important since, you know, we're having like 60,000 ward. But it's useful for, you know, if you ever forget to, you know, maybe consume your minions and whatnot, that means that you're going to have a higher base ward. So yeah, if I was to get more like ward decay threshold, that means that my number would be higher. So it's basically like getting additional flat ward. But the stats that you want to get on there are going to be intelligence, minion health, and necrotic resistance. And of course, I'm not going to like list them down, but you need to cap your resistances. So make sure that you are getting resistances on these pieces wherever you need it, right? For our amulet, this bone amulet, of course, is broken because it gives us necrotic resistance, but also physical resistance. It's the best base by far. And we want to have, ideally, exalted critical strike multiplier or necrotic penetration. And then necrotic resistance or minion health, right? So these are the stats that you want to aim for on the amulet and on the bone amulet. Bone amulets do not exist. Like, I've been looking for one for so long. So if you're lucky enough to get any of these exalted and you manage to finish your amulet, amazing, right? Like, honestly, that's amazing. My current amulet, unfortunately, is a oracle amulet, but it's pretty good. I would, like, honestly, it's not that good. Instead of necrotic resistance, I would 100% rather have you know, critical strike multiplier. But one thing that is good is that you can actually get frailty on your amulet, and frailty is going to be, you know, very nice. You want to get like maybe one source of frailty, and the amulet is a good spot to do that. So yeah, get frailty if you can and seal it, or yeah, you can always leave it. Now next for the belt, we are going to using the Immolator's Oblation, and this is why we're stacking self-ignite and why we're speccing our skills in a certain way. But I'll explain this a little bit. So the stat priority is, of course, necrotic resistance, minion health, or mana regen, and that's, of course, if you get it with legendary potential. But why is the Immolator's Oblation so strong? The reason why it's so strong is because it gives you flat spell damage for you know, fire and necrotic skills, stacking up to 40 times. So that's 5 multiplied by 40, right? That is so much flat damage that you're getting from this. And it's the reason why on single target, we'll be sitting there and spamming this to 40. And then we'll put our Chthonic Fissure. You got to note that the Chthonic Fissure is actually snapshotting that, right? It's snapshotting the flat damage that you have. So what you do is you stack it up to 40, you put it down, you do this, you do that. And then once it gets down, you can go back to spamming this, put that down again, and then you go back into the cycle. And that's basically like your single target cycle, right? You're going to be standing there, putting it down, pressing your bone curse, consuming them, going back to spamming, putting it down, putting your bone curse, consuming them, and so on and so forth. And you can basically like stand still in every single situation, so it's not a problem to just be focusing on your rotation when you're doing any single target encounter. You can see that we actually managed to get like almost 200,000 ward by doing that, so nothing will ever kill you, which is pretty cool. Now next, for the catalyst, you are gonna ideally want to be getting an opulent focus because it gives you ward retention. If you want more damage, of course, there is one that gives you critical strike multiplier for spells, but ideally ward retention is pretty good because it means that like once you do have this huge stack of ward, it's gonna go down slower. Essentially, that's what ward retention does. Stats on that, you want critical strike multiplier is always number 1, necrotic resistance, and then the other prefixes aren't that great, but necrotic damage, damage over time, or cast speed as well are pretty good on that. Now next for the gloves, this is sort of what enables our self-ignite, which are, you know, they seem like a little bit out of place, but bear with me, I'll explain it here in a bit. Melon's Hubris, because yeah, and then we get like legendary potential, intelligence, necrotic resistance, or armor plus crit reduction. So armor plus crit reduction is really nice because when stacked up to 100%, of course, you're taking no extra damage from critical strikes. And it's better than avoidance because you can get, you know, 100%, but also you get a ton of armor at the same time. And armor in this game is broken, it's damage reduction, and you want to get as much of it, of course. As much of it as possible. So yeah, Melon's Hubris, what's happening is you are converting your bleeds you convert them to ignites, right? And then here in your Spirit Plague, you are basically like inflicting bleeds with it, and you also inflict them on yourself. So essentially you are inflicting bleeds on yourself, and those bleeds are converted to ignites, and those ignites give you flat damage. So that's basically the synergy between both, you know, melons and also the immolators. And that's why we're using those two uniques, or legendaries rather. And yeah, aim to get these stats on there with legendary potential if possible, right? Now for the boots, the Scholar's Citadel boots are insane. I don't know if they're called Citadel boots. I think that's the name of the base. But yeah, they're insane because they give you 41 or up to 50% bonus damage, reduced damage taken from critical strikes, as well as a ton of armor and movement speed. But other bases are also fine. But make sure that you get this number to as close to 100 as possible. Now for the boots, the stat priority changes a little bit because they have sort of a unique stat pool, right? Movement speed and cooldown recovery rate are the only places that where you can like get them. I know you can get cooldown recovery rate on your belt as well, but since we're using the oblation, it's kind of hard. But yeah, getting these two on the boots is really good. And then you have, of course, intelligence, necrotic resistance, and armor plus crit reduction on there. And I'll show you guys what my boots look like currently. So I got pretty lucky. I got intelligence, movement speed, with necrotic resistance, cooldown recovery speed, and I also sealed T2 fizz resistance, which is pretty good. You know, ideally maybe like having exalted movement speed would be better, but yeah, these are pretty nice. However, you know, if you need to get actually like the armor and crit reduction on these, you would of course drop the necrotic resistance. But I'm actually getting them here because I managed to slam them on my gloves, so that's pretty cool. So I'm getting like, what is it, 26 plus 41? It's not quite 100, but it's you know, it's a lot of crit damage reduction taken, so that's pretty good, and a ton of armor too, which is pretty cool. Next, our relic. You know, the relic base, you kind of take what you get. Some of them have resistances on them, so that's okay as well if you want to like cap out your resistance with one of them. Some of them have necrotic damage as well, but this one has minion health, which minion health is pretty cool because it gives you higher numbers of ward, aka defenses and whatnot. So that's the one I got. And on the relic, you 100% want critical strike multiplier. It's another rare source of crit multi, necrotic resistance, and minion health if possible. And the idols, these are very hard to find. It's very hard to come across these, but you want them with spell curse damage, necrotic resistance, damage over time, or ward retention. I can quickly show you guys what I have. So for example, I have like, this one's insane actually. 8% cooldown recovery speed with transplant is pretty damn cool, with 10 spell curse. And then here I have some necrotic resistance and increased duration of profane veil. Some poison res because I actually needed a little bit more poison resistance. Spell for curses and, you know, less damage over time taken. And here again, some spell curses. And then I have like ward retention, cold res because I needed that stuff to cap my res, but you can see that still my poison resistance is not capped. And finally, the blessings. What do you need? You need to grind for critical strike multiplier as close to 40% as possible. And then I like having necrotic resistance as well. Necrotic resistance is pretty good on there, or you can go for all elemental resistances depending on, you know, if you're lacking resistances, you want to get it on here. It rolls up to 20%, which is pretty cool. And then you get armor and flat armor. Those are super good. Like 320 armor and then 55% increased armor. That's a lot of defenses. Nothing to scoff at. Like honestly, it is very good. So yeah, get those blessings. And that's pretty much gonna be like wrapping up all of the itemization and that kind of stuff. I am going to be linking my my profile in the video description so that you can sort of follow along with my progress and see what I've been doing. But hopefully this video has sort of like explained to you how it works and that kind of stuff. But quickly, let's just look at the skills and maybe talk about, like, justify some of the skills, the choices that we made here. So yeah, I mean, this one's pretty straightforward. Like Bone Curse, you're just stacking life, and then you want to go for Mark on Death, because Mark on Death is going to basically make it so monster resistance is going to be reduced by 25%, which is pretty good. And then we want that to last longer, you know, so we don't have to spam it. So that's why we go for Reaper's Mark. And then there's nothing really else to take, so that's why we go for some mana efficiency and cast speed, so that it's like, it just feels smoother and it costs less mana. Now for the Chthonic Fissure, you 100% want to go for Twisted Fate, Twisted Waves here, 3 points, and then 1 point into Grim Tide. Then here it shreds some of the necrotic resistance, which is really nice. Here you get, it's going to cost a lot more, but you have basically doubles your damage, so you get 2 fissures. That is very, very good. And then we gotta get as much spirit frequency as possible as well. And then into here, torment damage, 48% more torment damage is pretty nutty. Aside for that, then we get here additional damage to rares and bosses. So that's 16% more damage multiplicative, and then double that if they're cursed, which they are in our situation. So that's why we take that. And I talked about Spirit Plague like a tiny bit, but yeah, Spirit Plague, you go for Exsanguination and stack that up to 5. That's gonna make it feel like much smoother, so that you can actually self-ignite yourself. And then here you're gonna be inflicting plague, right? Then we get like a pestilence, so it's like a global damage over time, so that's cool. So essentially what's gonna happen is, like, as you're cursing things and things are dying, it's gonna give you additional damage over time, which is pretty cool. Then here for some cast speeds to make it feel smoother. This is really important because, yeah, you're gonna be spamming this to get your stacks up, so yeah, you want it to cast as fast as possible. And then Plague of Eyes, of course, to get additional damage per intelligence. And so since we're stacking so much intelligence, like we are getting a little bit of additional damage from this. It's not that much, but it's a decent amount. And then Transplant, I really love Transplant. Some people like to use Ghost Flame instead for their movement ability, but I really love Transplant. I think it synergizes really well with this build because, yeah, we're getting like a reliable source of haste. So every time you use it, you're gonna get haste for 3 seconds, and ideally you want to reduce your cooldown to as close to 3 as possible. Mine unfortunately is 3.5, and that's with cooldown recovery rate on my boots. But if you were to actually get cooldown recovery rate exalted on your boots, this would be closer to 3. So that's pretty cool. That's why we take the cooldown recovery speed here and the cast speed, and then we're going towards the armor nodes. The armor nodes are crazy. We're getting so much armor from transplanting. You're gonna get bone armor, and bone armor is gonna last for 4 seconds. However, there is a cooldown on it, right? So yeah, you're going to be getting bone armor from it, and then you want to increase the bone armor effect. And aside for that, you kind of just go for Violent Emergence, which basically is Calling Strike. So any target that is at 15% or less HP is going to die when you transplant on top of it. So you just basically, as you saw at the showcase at the start of the video, if something is about to get to 15%, you boom. And you got to make sure that the AoE is actually pretty small on this. So yeah, make sure you're aiming at him correctly. And then lastly, we got Profane Veil, which is kind of like, what's making the whole build broken, basically. And yeah, you want to spec into Vampiric Pool, 5 points into that, of course. And then the rest, you're going to be going for, Stream of Profanity, which essentially is going to reduce the cooldown as you are spamming curses. So you can see that, like, if I was to press it, it goes on cooldown, but if I spam Spirit Plague, the cooldown gets reduced, and that can be reduced 8 times. And that's why we are actually able to, like, spam that over and over again, because you're just like spam refreshing the cooldown. Yeah, and then we got like 5 points into here because you want to deal extra damage to cursed enemies while concealed. This is like, you're gonna notice that when you go into Profane Veil, your single target like is drastically increased, and that's because of this node right here. So that's pretty damn cool. And then also slows enemies and that whatnot, but also you get a ton of damage reduction, and armor applies to dot here too. And then we also want to go for Penance, which is like this is like a nice one-noder, but it's a little bit useless. We kind of don't really know what else to put our points in, so we're just going to be taking Penitent Tangent, some minus mana cost, and yeah, that pretty much sums up all of the skills. And I hope that I haven't really forgotten anything with the build. So yeah, again, I will link my planner in my profile in the description. I know you guys probably are used to seeing like planners with perfect gear and that kind of stuff, but I'm just going to be linking my profile so you guys can like follow along if I ever make upgrades, or if I ever actually come across some like new technology or anything like that, or even if like if you're watching this in the future and they potentially fix the bug, what I did to mitigate or rather, yeah, to mitigate the bug and basically the lack of ward that we get in comparison to what we were able to get before. But now I'm rambling kind of, and yeah. Also to note, this build tanks T4 Jolra. Like, the explosion doesn't do anything to you. I was too lazy to record footage for that, I'm sorry. But if you want to stop by the Twitch and watch the build, in action live, stop by the Twitch, twitch.tv/crouching_tuna, and the video has gone on for 25 minutes now. So I'm just going to stop talking and Thank you very much. 07, thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Make the build. It's fucking insane. Make the build like right now. I'm telling you. Make it right now.